SCORE Northeast Wisconsin and WHBY are pleased to bring you Biz Talk, a chance for you to hear from entrepreneurs and professionals as they share their experiences. From starting to sustaining growth, learn the skills needed for your business to be successful. If you miss anything, you can catch the Biz Talk podcast at score.org/Northeast Wisconsin. And now from the Myron Construction Studio, it's Biz Talk on WHBY.
And good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here for another wonderful episode of Biz Talk with SCORE here on WHBY. And today I am joined by my co-host, Rick Sense. Good morning, Rick.
Good morning, Mary.
Thanks so much for being here again for this awesome episode. I am incredibly honored to announce and introduce here today our guest, Megan Dickman-Renard. Megan is founder and CEO of Dickman Media Group, and also CEO and publisher of the Business News. Good morning, Megan. Thanks so much for being here.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, we have a pretty awesome show ahead of us here today. We have a ton of questions for you. Your background is one that has always fascinated me, and I'm excited for our listeners today to get to know you a little bit more, and certainly get to hear about that background, about the career, your ventures, and just really learn about the powerhouse that you are here as we're highlighting this month, Women in Business. So this month of September, all of our episodes of Biz Talk focus on the women throughout Northeast Wisconsin who are just out there making things happen. And you are one of those. And we're so happy to have you join us today. So just kind of starting off here, I mentioned already, I kind of precursored your fascinating background, your college degrees, the many of them that you have. And I'd love for you to kind of give listeners some insight into who you are and some of those amazing degrees that you hold, and just tell us a little bit about yourself from that standpoint.
Yeah, when talking about my background, I always say that I took the scenic route. There are some people who take a really direct path. And for the longest time, I was really jealous of those people. You know, when you grow up and you knew exactly what you wanted to do, you did the degree that made sense for that, and you went into the career and it felt really clean and really linear and like you knew what you were doing. I did not know exactly where I wanted to go. So I explored as I kind of went along this path. So my degrees are in classics, anthropology, classical humanities, and art history was kind of the original. I went heavy into the humanities. For me, what was always really exciting is like how people put things like language together, culture together. Like, how do we build the world around us? And in studying so many languages, my master's is in Latin and ancient Greek. What I really loved is how you construct your world is based on the limits of your language. If it doesn't exist in your language, you can't express it. So it's a really interesting way of how we analyze the world. So going from a place where language was super, super deep, I ended up graduating with my master's, and then I moved back to Green Bay, where I'm from. And I did at that time what I called scrapping my degree for spare parts. So I pulled out all of the things that were useful, which was perhaps unsurprisingly not the Greek, but it was the research skills, the translation skills, the really careful communication, and built a business that was a writing, editing, and translation business. And that was a huge part. We translated from 27 different languages. Thankfully, I do not speak 27, but it was, yeah. But I leaned heavily into language, and I fell in love there.
What would you say is something valuable, if you can really pinpoint specifically something or some things that were really valuable from your career path, your collegiate path? Is there something that you've gained or learned from that path that you've really been able to weave into who you are now, and certainly the ventures that you've taken on?
Yeah, in some ways, I've been, talking about myself lately as a little bit of a magpie, right? You collect things from different experiences and you bring them out. And one of the things that has been recently perhaps most surprising is when I was studying ancient Greek, I studied ancient Greek philosophy, which has this wonderful, depending on what type of philosophy you're talking about, but a lot of conversations around ethics. What do we owe the future? What do we owe our community? How do you be a good citizen? And as I've come to the business news, I think the first year of the business news, I was really trying to solve what I felt was a market problem. And then year two, and I should say, and I was doing that kind of at the time, I felt in spite of my education, not with that as kind of a catalyst. And in year two, I realized that the philosophy was so important to how we do news and to incorporate that into how we think. How do we use news, information, and that publication as a way to make our community better, to really give it the things that it should have, to really listen, to really lean into, like I said, the philosophy of it. So that's maybe one of the most surprising ones that I ended up kind of finding a direct path. But now I think we're powered by philosophy. And I think my team eventually gets sick of me saying, philosophically speaking, at the start or finish of just about every meeting. But I think it's important because I think you can't just think about the rote tasks that you do. And in news, you're doing very similar things every day. Like the stories change, but you're doing similar tasks. How do you make those feel bigger and more significant than what they are? And that's by, I think, having this broader philosophical lens.
Megan, in looking through your past, you've had a very interesting career path. And what do you think you've pulled forward that has benefited you the most so far in what you're doing at the business news and with the Dickman Media Group?
Yeah. I had I have the formal kind of college background, but I think, we're a collection of all of our experiences. And I had the privilege of being raised by two parents who are very, very entrepreneurial. And that gave me a couple things. One is this idea that, risk is not a bad thing. In fact, risk can be a very beautiful thing. It's calculated risk, right? You don't want to just do it blindly. But risk is interesting. And then feedback is such a gift. So there were kind of all of these things, but it meant that, so heading into the business news, if I were to connect kind of the links between my background and how you end up at the business news, how do you go from classics, philosophy, archaeology, and become somebody who's running a newspaper? So
that's $1 million question. I feel like.
Yeah. But because of having parents who are entrepreneurial, they really taught me to look for where friction points are. And then are there ways that you can fix it? Are there ways you can make it better? And to include yourself in that problem solving. Are you going to be the one who jumps in? Are you going to help create the team that does? Are you going to champion somebody who's already in that space? But if you see a problem, you shouldn't just back away from it. You should investigate that problem. And so for me, during the pandemic, I worked at a technology startup. So we were in the tabletop role-playing game space. So Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder. And it was a really interesting time when this game that traditionally would have been, a very hands-on thing, people were playing digitally. So it was this conversation. And at the time, the startup got a partnership contract with Marvel Entertainment, which was awesome. I'll out myself as an extreme nerd if the D&D comment didn't already. Right, D&D. And that was a moment for me where it was like, okay, I'm their head of community. I'm their head of content. This is a moment that, this startup in Green Bay, Wisconsin, run by two people who grew up in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, the birthplace of D&D, super interesting people. And one of the founders is a former All-Pro center for the Dallas Cowboys. It was this really cool story. And they were working with Marvel, on this play test book. And it felt really cool. I still get chills thinking about it right now. Once a PR person, always a PR person in some ways. And I'm like, okay, we got to share the story. So you start reaching out to people, and it got picked up in the digital edition of Forbes, which was wonderful. And then when it got picked up other places, it wasn't as successful. It chose to focus kind of on the industry as a whole, and it missed really, I felt, what was exciting about the opportunity, what we were doing, the value we were trying to build, that vision we had for the future. And it was a moment of reflection of we can't be the only business that's struggling to get media to understand what's so important about our business. And And around the same time, the previous owner of the paper reached out and he said, hey, you used to be an editor. Would you want to be an editor again? I'm looking for somebody who would buy the business news. And so if you grew up with that kind of set of conditions, you've now found, okay, I have a problem. I should investigate that problem. Now I have a vehicle where I could help create a solution. So I jumped in. And we've been building ever since. But that's a case where you can be the solution.
Well, and I think anyone who's tuned into the local news here throughout the area, and then maybe some of us more than others, as I live in the PR world a lot, there has been some noticeable changes to that newspaper product, right? And I think, print media has always been scrutinized, and especially in the last, say, decade or more, it's been heavily scrutinized as being old and out of touch and all of those things. And Megan, you and I have had a lot of conversations around that specific topic. But before we dive too deep into, the survival of print media and the thriving nature of print media, tell us a little bit, touch on your team for a second. Let's give your team a shout out, and just how you've built the team that's around you that puts out such a great product.
Yeah, and I will say I would say a small but mighty team. So we're a team of 8. We actually had 2 new people within the last week, which is incredible. I think I told somebody, they asked me how I was doing, and I said I'm so happy I could weep openly, like having those extra people, because we cover 43 counties of Wisconsin, so we cover over 60% of the state of Wisconsin. So I have an editor, Heather. I have 3 staff writers. We have a salesperson, of course, an administrative assistant who just came out, and a researcher. I love a couple things about them. I mean, amongst all of their individualities, which I love, but Heather was the first. And I think what's so special about Heather, and I will sing her praises for forever, is I came to her with a vision. I came to her as somebody who did not come up through media. And instead had kind of said, hey, I think there might be an issue here. Hey, I think there might be a vehicle here. And I had a meeting and I said, imagine that this vehicle doesn't have to look like this, doesn't have to be like this, but this is the problem I'm trying to solve. Can you see what I'm seeing? Can you help me fix that? And to her credit, she could have very easily said, I'm not open to a project, or, hey, you don't know anything about media. And instead, what she said is, I think I see it too. And she's been in there every day, really fighting to build that vision. And that's the other part of the energy of the team is like, we are all really excited about what we're doing. And I think my team really gets it. The other thing is we like leading with curiosity. In something that I didn't realize was a condition of working with me from a staff writer perspective until I came up on a situation about a year ago where I was interviewing somebody who didn't have this, is this ability to treat every situation like you're experiencing it for the first time. So if you're talking to somebody in agriculture, you don't want to bring all of the background, all of the package of what it was like to talk with the last person you talked with in agriculture. You want them to teach you. You want them to show you what it's like from their perspective so that you can really learn from them in that story. Sometimes you see people who carry all of their kind of knowledge baggage around with them, and they have a very, very specific lens. My team has a great ability to be very open-minded about what that lens is and to let the subject of the story lead where they're going.
With that, we'll take our first break. You're listening to Biz Talk with Score on WHBY, and we will be right back with Megan Dickman-Renard after these messages. Welcome back to Biz Talk with Score on WHBY. I'm Rick Sense, along with Mary Rohde this morning. We have the great pleasure of talking with Megan Dickman-Renard, founder and CEO of Dickman Media Group and CEO and publisher of the Business News. But before we get back to our conversation, I'd just like to take a minute to talk about SCORE. SCORE Northeast Wisconsin serves an 18-county area in northeast Wisconsin, plus the county of Menominee in Michigan. We have over 50 volunteers, each an expert in their field, offering entrepreneurs no-cost and confidential mentoring. Those areas of expertise include IT, social media, marketing, cash flow, accounting, strategic planning, workflow, human resources, retail, best practices, and many, many others. In order to register for a no-cost confidential mentoring session and or to learn more about SCORE Northeast Wisconsin, Visit our website at score.org/Northeast Wisconsin. You can learn more about how the SCORE chapter can assist you with starting and or growing your business, and you can complete an application for a mentoring session online. Simply complete the form and submit it to SCORE. Within a few days, a SCORE mentor will be contacting you to set up a meeting. Remember, SCORE is no cost and offers experts who can offer you assistance in many different areas. To get started, please visit our website at score.org/Northeast Wisconsin. And to support small business people, SCORE Northeast Wisconsin is always looking for new mentors. If you have experience that you would like to share with others, we'd love to talk to you. We welcome volunteers with experience in all aspects of business. Small business owners need your help, and your experience can make a real difference to their success. Go to score.org/Northeast Wisconsin, click on the volunteer button and fill out the short application, and we'll get back to you to explain more. So back to our show, and Megan, Mary touched on this a little bit in the first segment, and she talked about this kind of belief that media, especially print media, is kind of in decline. And I think print media survives, and in some ways it's thriving right now. And why do you think print media keeps defying the prediction of its demise?
Yeah, I think that people consume information in new ways, in different ways. And some of the originals, they don't go away. I still know people who, and I'm one of them, which is, but of course I also run the paper. I still get the print Wall Street Journal delivered to my house. Like there's something about business news in print too that I think has a even more enduring legacy than in some other, maybe local papers. But I think that there's a value in print. I advocate for this almost quiet moment alone. You think that the digital world can be really noisy and really distracting. And you have, I have an embarrassing number of tabs open at any minute. You've got, ads that pop up on the side. And I think that there's something to be said of, drinking your morning coffee and getting to read the paper and to really be present. Studies have also shown that you absorb more information when you're reading it on print versus reading it on a screen. So you think about different levels of engagement, different ways people like receiving certain types of information. But we do print, but we also understand people like consuming information in other ways. So we really try to be multimedia. One of the things that's really important to me is accessibility. And as much as I love print, there are people who, reading in general is not something that they enjoy. So you try to meet them where they are. If that means audio, if that means a video capability, that's something that we're working on building out more the video side too, but meeting them where they are. And for some people, print is still just, it's an incredible tactile experience, and it's how people like to receive information. I probably could go on for a while about the value of print. But I think there's something to be said as you've looked through, the evolution of it. It hasn't gone away. And if something has staying power, to go back to one of my earlier things, like the process of investigating it and figuring out why, like that's a worthy cause.
So if we go back in time to the late 1800s and even into early in the last century, print media moguls, many who had oversized personalities like Hearst and Mencken, were often strong, powerful voices in their communities, even in our country. How would you describe the business news's voice in our community?
I think what's interesting about a lot of those is that they were very strong voices and their products were really strong voices. And not to say ours isn't, but I think the thing that we value is bringing a voice, so the person or business in the story, to the audience of the community. And we would rather be that conduit between those two experiences than be the voice. And I think it's really important to have that facilitator almost. And we work really, really hard to debias it as much as possible. We go through a really strong, so we always say everybody on the team can challenge anybody's biases. So we'll do multiple reads. Everything that goes out in the paper goes through 6 sets of eyes before it ends up in print. Because for us, it's really, really important to say, okay, check us on our biases, try to make sure that this is from as neutral of a lens as possible. If we're sharing something that's a multi-sided, 2, 3, whatever, making sure that everybody is represented, so that, they can experience the story pretty much how we did. So I think the value is being, how do we faithfully represent what happened without having a really strong kind of flavor or lens on it, and just bring it right to you.
So what is the coverage area for the business news? How would you best describe the business news to someone, and what area they concentrate on and serve in our community?
Yeah, so we cover 43 counties of Wisconsin, and that includes, so there are 3 papers, the Northeast Wisconsin region, a North Central, and a West Central. And the way that I think about them is actually, by economic development kind of regions. So our Northeast is the New North, our North Central is Synergy and Grow North, and then our West Central is Momentum West and Seven Rivers Alliance. And I like thinking about it in terms of that, because then you have these kind of heartbeats of economic development that fall neatly within. And it just, especially when we're talking about some economic trends or topics, instead of having to split out things in ways that don't make sense, they fall pretty neatly into those areas. We don't go south, and there's no plans to go south, because, Madison and Milwaukee have their own business products, and I mean, they do a great job there too. I want to just cover most of the rest of the state.
Okay. All right. This is a perfect time to take our second break of the day. You're listening to Biz Talk with SCORE on WHBY, and we will be right back after these messages.
All right, welcome back, everyone, and thanks again so much for joining us here on Saturday morning for another episode of Biz Talk with SCORE here on WHBY. And as we continue our Women in Business celebration this month, both on air here and also on the podcast, today's guest is very fitting. She is Megan Dickman-Renard, and she is the founder and CEO of Dickman Media Group, and also the CEO and publisher of the Business News. And we've had some phenomenal guests this month, and certainly encourage you all to go check out the Biz Talk podcast. It is available wherever you can wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we've had Kathy Tierney on this month, a really impressive and amazing episode there. And coming up yet this month, as we continue to celebrate women in business, we have Polly Mua. She is with the Schneider Institute for Women, which is encompassed within the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. So that is one of the episodes here coming up later this month. But getting back to learning more and hearing more from Megan. Megan, if I haven't told you this in previous conversations, I'll say this now. You are certainly one of the female entrepreneurs that really just hit the mark for me. You stand out as someone, I mentioned it earlier, you're just a powerhouse. And I'd love to hear, there's definitely challenges, right, out there, being a female entrepreneur, paving the way, crashing through the ceiling, whatever amount of analogies you want to use. But talk to us a little bit about some of those challenges, being a female entrepreneur, being a business owner. What are some of those that you've, crashed through, jumped over? How have you handled some of those challenges that have come your way on your journey to become and be where you are today?
I think I have, and in a lot of ways, I think a lot of women in our community now too have, there's I stand on the back of giants. Like, there have been some incredibly transformative female business leaders that have come before in our community that, paved the way in a lot of really incredible ways and helped, kick down doors for other people and, have some of those hard conversations so that I get to have slightly easier ones now. And I think that's a really important thing to sing out, is that, my hope is that, I help do that for the next generation too, so that they have it a little easier too. And I think if we can keep doing that, that's so important, because I have some incredible role models from people that have just been able to do that for me. I think maybe it's a little bit of a Winston Churchill thing too. It's like, you can't get very far if you, stop to, I forget if it's like shout at every dog that barks. So with anything you do, and I think, if you're a business leader, if you're a female, there will be people who have comments. There will be people who sometimes really care and want to champion you. Sometimes they want to champion you for something that's not about you. And sometimes you have people that, try to be oppositional, or they don't want something to exist, or they want it to exist, but they don't want you to be the one to do it. And I think a lot of times if you stop and you let those things get to you, or if you stop and you say, okay, I believe really strongly in feedback, which I do, and you say, hey, I really should reflect and see if there's a validity to that statement, you can get really caught up in it. And I think a thing that I've done successfully, and I think a thing that I encourage people around me to do, is keep going. Don't stop, don't reflect on those negative pieces. Just build the next thing, do the next thing. Because it's really easy to get hung up on some of that. I still, early on in my career, I remember one of the first ones when I had crystal clear resources, that writing, editing, and translation business. I had worked on a project, and it had been one of those where it was really for the exposure, right? And in the hopes that the next thing would be really great. And so I had, really worked hard on this project for what I ended up realizing I had quoted ridiculously little for what I should have quoted for this project. And I kept this one account on my books because it's the first and only time I've really been stiffed on a project. They did not pay. He did not pay. I got sent a rollerball of Victoria's Secret perfume.
Stop.
Right.
Oh my God.
And I remember I just looked at the gift bag and I'm like, what is this? And I called my dad and I'm like, I guarantee this has never happened to you. And he's like, nope, you're 100% right. That's never happened to me. And I kind of kept it mentally as a curiosity of just okay, know how to have some of those conversations. And when I could have had a really difficult conversation with that individual. And instead I kind of moved on to the next thing. But things like that, I sometimes keep around just as reminders that, we all have stories like those in our history, and you learn things from that. I don't think that I learned the lesson that he wanted me to learn in that situation, but I absolutely learned a lesson. And I still think about that moment because it created a situation where I know what I'm worth. I know how better to kind of interact with people. I know how to act in that situation. And I didn't let it, prevent me from having momentum. Has done that since.
That's a very powerful moment when you realize your worth. And I've had that, recently happen to me as well. And it is an incredibly empowering moment, when you can identify that. And I feel like almost in a way it's, you've reached that point in your career where you know exactly what your skills are worth and certainly how much you as a person, are worth. And that's a very, very powerful moment. What would you say are some common misconceptions out there about female business owners? And I'll even extend that to, females that are, in a C-suite level, perhaps even, what are some of those things that you've either encountered or have heard about just existing out there in the world?
Yeah. And I'll say too, the best part about this is that it's not universally true. There are, I feel like it gets rarer and rarer that I'm in the middle of some of these situations, which I love. I think there tends to be maybe some thought that women by nature are a lot more emotional, and that emotions in work are something that they don't mix. It's funny. I talk with people. There's that saying, right, that it's not personal. It's just business. Business is one of the most personal things you do. It is absolutely personal. It is absolutely emotional. And it is something that, if you pretend that you don't have emotions around business, you're probably lying to yourself. Now, if you think that having emotions around business is a bad thing, you're probably also lying to yourself, because emotions can be, if you're channeling them correctly, can be an incredible powerhouse. And, they can help signal when you know that something feels right, when something feels wrong. And, if you think, okay, so if you're in a situation where something feels wrong, you don't know what it is, but you know it feels wrong, and you decide, because I'm in business, I'm going to not listen to that emotion, you're probably going to end up in a situation that's not a good situation. when if you had listened to your emotions, listened to your intuition, you could be in a much better place. So use emotions how they're meant to be used, and really, analyze where they're coming from. They're not a detriment. They're only a detriment if you let them be. So I think that emotional side, there's always all of the things around being a mother or a caregiver, or I sometimes think about the accidental secretary problem, where how many times you've been in a situation and you might be the only female in the room, and it's like, okay, somebody's going to take notes, and it's going to be, somehow it always ends up being you. It is okay to refuse to take notes. Everybody there has the ability to do it. But sometimes things like that happen just by default because they know, that maybe it's something that maybe a lot of women like taking. I actually do like taking notes, but I don't want to be the default person taking notes. You want to be thought of on the same playing field as everybody else. So I think sometimes it's the default thinking that can fall in where it's not necessarily poorly intentioned. It's just part of maybe how society views some of those interactions. But I think it's okay to question those too. It's okay to,
So, what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of being a business owner? Now, understanding that in a way you own two businesses, right? So you can deviate or separate those if you choose to in your answer. But what's been kind of that awesome moment for you in your venture to be and become a business owner?
I think of business as almost an art form. So I've gone on this soapbox with a couple of people who know me well, but an artist works in a certain medium, right? You might be a painter, you work in acrylics, you might be a potter, you work in clay. I feel like I work in business, and what I love is business is this absolutely like creative engine for building new things, for building value, for building up people. And I think some of the coolest things I get to do is when you see a gap or when you see something that doesn't exist, when you can see the potential of what could be there, there's really nothing stopping you from being the one who builds it. You can be that person who builds the solution, who creates the product, who says, I wish that this service existed. I have a team who will help me do that and be there. But the ability to make something out of nothing, to bring value to people. And then, as I said, to build people up, that's the other thing I love is, oftentimes I might be somebody's first stop on a career journey. I might not be their last stop, and I might know that. So I had somebody recently who was in law school at the same time as she was working for most of with the paper. And I knew that she was going to leave us someday. To practice law, she would have to. But then you think, okay, what can I teach you and how can I help grow you to who you want to be while you're with me? And seeing the difference between how she was when she first started with me and then when she left, like it was incredible to see who she had become, who she really built herself into. That was one of if I talk about joys of my career, that is one of them, like seeing somebody just become so themselves.
This seems very apparent and clear, but that's a sign of a great leader. So kudos to you for seeing that in her and helping her become who she needed to be. That's really, really cool.
But I will say it means having an employee who's willing to go there with you too. Like I think it's so about trust, because you can't lead somebody or help somebody if they don't want to be there, if they want to go there. So it really has to be both sides. So she was an incredible employee. So it's in instances like that make you a better leader and they make you look good in these kind of situations, but it's just as much her, if not more so, than it is me.
Let's switch gears for a second. In the previous segment, we, touched on, print media and what it was, what it's become, what some look at it as. And at the end of the day, print is just another media product, right? It's another vehicle out there to which people can, get information out, certainly tell stories, right? All of that. But all that being said, there's no doubt about it that the landscape of media, how people absorb it, where they go, where they seek out some of that storytelling has drastically changed over the last, I'll say decade, but it could be longer than that. What would you say? What is your favorite, I guess, media tip or something that you'd share to people who are, out there and interested and they want to get their story told? What is something that you would share? And then I guess in addition to that, to kind of make this a two-part question, how would you, what are your plans for continuing to evolve the business news as it stands and really make it last through this, digital first world that we live in?
Yeah, I think we all have heard people say that media is dying, like journalism is a dying industry. And I always prefer to flip that and kind of say, it's an evolving industry, like all of our industries are right now. We're all grappling with, massive technological change, with disruption, with this idea that, technology is coming at us faster than ever. It's this acceleration of acceleration. And it's not dying. It hasn't figured out where it belongs yet in this new landscape. And I think it will figure it out. It's an evolving industry. So I think, don't give up on media, first of all, because, we think of ourselves, and you kind of hit on it, as storytellers, right? The best thing that we do is we tell the stories of our community so that more people can hear about it, of businesses doing incredible things, building things. And that's one of the best things that we get to do. The other thing is be a thoughtful consumer of media. If you choose to, however you choose to consume it, think about who it's coming from and why they're delivering it to you, maybe in that way, maybe at all, and just really be thoughtful about it if you can. I advocate for that. The other thing is, if I went on a side soapbox, I think the idea that, media has to be entertainment, especially news. News doesn't have to be entertainment. It's information. That doesn't mean facts have to be boring. It can be fun. It can be interesting, but it's not entertainment. And I think deconflating those two things and trying to separate them back out again is going to be one of the most important things that we do. Facts can be fun. They don't need to entertain. We have a whole bunch of different sources for entertainment. And then there's this idea that anybody with kind of a smartphone can kind of do the news, right? You can be first. You can show up. You can take video of something. But the thing is, just because you're first and just because you're there doesn't mean that there's not a bias to it. And just by nature of what you're able to capture, for a long time, we've talked about how photographs only, daguerreotypes only capture a tiny bit of what exists. They don't capture what's outside the frame. So just remember, there's bias in pretty much everything that we experience. The training of a true journalist is to strip that away, to remove bias, to create a larger lens. And that's what's really important. So maybe that's 5 media tips.
That's okay.
If I had a plea, don't give up on media. It's trying to figure you out. Like as a market, it's trying to figure out where it's going. And you have people that consume it in new and different ways. Media needs to figure out how to meet people where they are and how to capture those audiences. It will figure it out. It needs to figure it out. Now for things that are next for us, we're trying to figure it out, which is good. We recognize people consume news information in ways that are new and ways that aren't, but people learn in so many different ways. They like to experience certain types of information in different ways. So how do you give those products to people in the ways where they're going to consume them and in ways that fit seamlessly into their normal schedule, their daily routine?
All right. We've arrived at our third break. You're listening to Biz Talk with Score on WHPY, and we will be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Biz Talk with Score on WHPY. I'm Rick Sense, along with co-host Mary Rohde this morning. And we are in the middle of a great conversation with Megan Dickman-Renard, who has been gracious enough to join us this morning on the program. But before we go into any more of the program, I'd just like to take a moment to talk about our sponsors and like to thank them, first of all, and thank the donors and the sponsors who bring Biz Talk with Score to you each weekend. We couldn't present Biz Talk without their generous support. Thank you to Hailing and Associates. Hailing and Associates helps small businesses and individuals not just prepare tax returns, but plan ahead, helping you minimize taxes for this year and beyond. Hailing and Associates, personal connection, positive results. Thank you to Johnson Financial Group. Wherever you are in life or in the life of your business, Johnson Financial Group works with you to understand your goals, matching the right banking and wealth services to help you complete your mission. And special thanks to the Business News for promoting our program in the biweekly business newspaper serving Northeast Wisconsin. The paper is delivered biweekly and contains relevant and useful information about the business community in Northeast Wisconsin. It is truly a must-read. We would also like to recognize the David L. and Rita E. Nelson Fund within the Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region for their generous donation in support of Biz Talk and SCORE Northeast Wisconsin. So, Megan, I just would like to give you the opportunity to share your wisdom. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs out there that are just getting started?
It's funny how your career evolves, and the answer I probably would have given a couple years ago and the answer now, I think I would have two. So one is to start, which sounds really simple. It's not. But I think often people get hung up on this idea that you have to have it all figured out. So before you can start, you have to have the entire business figured out. You have to have the entire market figured out. You have to have the entire product or solution or whatever you're building. You have to know everything. And sometimes the best thing is just to start somewhere. You can start small if you want, but to start to get out in the market so that you can start really listening to the market, and having some of these kind of micro adjustments based on what you're finding. Otherwise, if you build too big before you enter with this monolith thing that then makes it a lot harder to move and adjust. Because my second one would be that feedback is absolutely a gift. And a lot of people, it's like you have to be so open to all kinds of feedback, good, bad. I would always say, like, the only thing that, hangs me up is apathy. So when you ask a question or put a hypothesis, you put your business out there and you get crickets. You don't know why you're getting crickets. You don't know if it's because people don't care or people aren't resonating with it. If people don't give you feedback, positive or negative, you can't do anything. So sometimes people forget, like, negative feedback is a gift too. It doesn't feel like it in the moment, but you can adjust if you don't know what it is. So I always say at the ends of meetings, which I think you guys both know, I always ask for questions, comments, concerns, and insults, which is a little tongue in cheek, but what that's really meant to do is say, I invite all forms of feedback and I want you to feel comfortable sharing them with me because it makes us all better. And you can't change or adapt without it.
Are you having fun?
Yeah.
Are you having fun, Megan? Always.
Yeah. I love what I do. And I love how, honestly, how it makes people feel when we approach somebody about a story. And we had it happen just this week too, because it happens, I wouldn't say every week, but pretty much, where we reach out and said, hey, we would love to do a story on you. And they're like, why? My favorite, actually, the one this week was funny. He said, we're reaching out to somebody who does horse breeding. And he's like, why are you talking to me? Like, we're a horse breeder yet. And I was like, yes, we know that. That's why we're reaching out to you. You're interesting. We want to know more. And the way that you see people share and light up and they get excited about the fact that somebody else is excited about what they care about. And that's one of the coolest things of what I get to do.
Well, and we're doing this interview on Zoom, which many may not know, but if people could only see your face right now, because as you were answering that question, you were smiling ear to ear, which shows your true passion for what you do, and that at the end of the day, you have to love what you do. So hopefully throughout this episode, we have given people, have whet their appetite for reading, the beautiful products that you, have created. And we've touched on the business news. You also have the new business review, which is a beautiful publication front to back, a little separate from the newspaper. But want to give you an opportunity for you to share how people can get their hands, on all the amazing products that you have.
Yes, you can find the business news at thebusinessnews.com online. You can subscribe through there. We have the new business review as well, our quarterly publication, and our annual book of lists, which will be coming out soon. And We've got a whole bunch of fun things that you can find too on our website. Otherwise, we're also on LinkedIn. We're on social, and you can find me there as well.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. And Megan, thank you for being our guest this morning. Much appreciated. And listeners, if you want to listen again to the episode, look for it on Wednesday on our podcast. And we will, again, thank you for your support and joining us this morning. Without you, this show isn't possible. So we look forward to next week, and take care, everyone. And until then, take care.